Okay, we'll start now. See, today we are going to take up one important topic in philosophy paper one from Western philosophy. The topic basically, if we see the PYQs, every year, definitely we get a question from that. But since it is one of the last topics, usually students neglect this topic. Uh, but let me tell you, this is quite easy to understand. It's not that difficult. So if students spend small time also, little time also, they will be able to understand this topic, and at least easily they can score 20 marks question, because every year 15 to 20 marks question definitely come from this topic. Now, the topic which I am going to take up today is phenomenology, and that is basically only one philosopher is there, Edmund Husserl. So now let me share the document and then we can discuss. One thing I can tell you, I'm going to explain this topic in very simple words so that it will be very easy for the students to understand this topic. Uh, see, this branch of philosophy, or this phase of philosophy, uh, phenomenology, was, as I told, depends on only one philosopher, that is Edmund Husserl, because in other actually topics there are number of philosophers, but this is very few of the philosophy topics where only one philosopher we need to study. And he also was a philosopher, modern philosopher of 20th century. Basically, as we will see in subsequent paragraphs, he attempted to develop a new method of philosophy that would allow the philosophers to study human experience in its most pure and direct form. So this was his basically the result of his philosophy, or you can say the objective of his philosophy, to study human experience in its most pure and direct form. As I told, he was a 20th century philosopher, basically born, if you see, 1859 and died in 1938. Now, if we see his contribution or his uh, books, etc., or the writings, uh, his famous work is Logical Investigations. And later, a few other uh, articles he wrote, ideas pertaining to a pure phenomenology and to a phenomenological philosophy, then Cartesian meditations. Now, subsequent writings basically refined the phenomenological method, which was earlier pronounced in logical investigations. So, but logical investigation is the base work of Husserl, in which the whole concept of phenomenology has been pronounced. Uh, he basically believed in a very, uh, uh, I mean, basically concept that philosophy should become just like science. And science also a rigorous science. But then there has to be difference between natural sciences and philosophy. So therefore, what he said, that philosophy should focus uh, as a scientific study on structures of consciousness and experience. So that was his basically the main objective, or main, you can say, concern of studying philosophy, or his pronunciation of phenological method. Now, his motto was, I mean, this also has come a number of times in the exam, back to the things themselves. To describe, I mean, the questions have been asked to describe back to the things themselves. This is associated with Edmund Husserl and associated with phenomenology, and also associated with the study of structure of consciousness and experience. So, what does it mean? This back to the things themselves means that philosophy should not start with theories or scientific explanations or metaphysical assumptions, that what is God, what is soul, or what are the how this word is related with God. And so all these are metaphysical assumptions, basically. So instead, what philosophy should do? Philosophy should begin with how things actually appear in our experience. So if you see his objective study of structures of consciousness and experience, and then his motto back to the things themselves, and then the claim that philosophy should study or philosophy should find out or begin with how things actually appear in our experience. This was what Husserl's concept. Now let us try to understand meaning of phenomenology. Now this term comes from a Greek word, phenomenon, and literally it means that which appears. So basically, this is the systematic study of phenomena. This can be in a simple linguistic terms, it can be defined that systematic study of phenomena is phenomenology. Now, what is systematic study of phenomena? Things as they appear in consciousness. So this is what Husserl told is the phenomena. And philosophy should be, or phenomenology should be, study of things as they appear in consciousness. So a phenomenon is not necessarily the object as it exists independently in the external world. Rather, what is that? That is, phenomena is object as experienced or perceived by consciousness. So this is the definition of phenomena as far as Husserl is concerned. Now, we'll take a few examples. Suppose we are looking at a tree. Now, in ordinary thinking, what we assume that there is a real tree outside. But what phenomenology does, it immediately makes such assumptions. It does not make such assumptions and asks, what does it ask, phenomenology? How does tree appears in consciousness? What is the structure of this experience? What elements make the perception possible? So basically, this becomes the study of the experience itself. And Husserl has described phenomenology as a rigorous and descriptive method whose main task is to describe experience exactly as it is given in consciousness. So this is phenomenology as far as Husserl is concerned. Now, there are different terms. Now, sometimes we think that these terms are same, but it's not that. For example, phenomenology, which is associated with Husserl, is one term. Then phenomenalism. This is associated with basically empiricist philosophers, Berkeley and Hume, and this is totally different. So now let us try to understand what are the difference between these two terms, because it should not be confused. There should not be any confusion, because sometimes we feel that both are same. See, phenomenalism is an epistemological theory. What is epistemological theory? Theory of knowledge. So this is a theory of knowledge. Wherever epistemology is there, it's knowledge, theory of knowledge. Whereas metaphysics is there, it's theory of reality. So this is a theory of knowledge associated with empiricist philosophers, as I told, Berkeley, Hume. And according to phenomenalism, all knowledge of external world is based on sense experience. Material objects are nothing but collection of sensory expressions. So as example, if we take, for example, a table or a tree or a house or any material object, is simply a bundle of sensations for them, such as color, shape, hardness, texture. All these are a bundle of basically sensations, and any object is a bundle of these sensations. Thus, what happens, what phenomenalism does, it reduces objects to the sense data. And this is what Berkeley and Hume have done in their philosophy. Now, for example, in modern, Berkeley and Hume are anyway directly associated with this, but in modern philosophy also, if we take up, in Vienna Circle, philosophers such as A.J. Ayer has also in some way associated with phenomenalism. Now, what is phenomenology? And what are the difference between two? Let us understand in a tabular form. See, phenomenology, as I told, empiricist theory of knowledge. Phenomenology is philosophical method as advocated by Husserl. What this theory does, it makes objects to sense data. What phenomenology does, objects appear in consciousness. This phenomenalism focuses on sensory experience. Phenomenology focuses on structures of meaning. Phenomenalism is concerned with the origin of knowledge, because this is an epistemological theory. Phenomenology is concerned with description of the experience itself. So if you see, these are the brief differences between these two terms and concepts. And these are not two same concepts, entirely different concepts. So therefore, phenomenology therefore does not attempt to explain how experience originate. Phenomenalism actually does this, because that is theory of knowledge. But phenomenology, what it does, what is given in the consciousness, it tries to describe that. So there is a difference between the two. Now, what is Husserl's aim? As we told in the beginning itself, in the introduction, he wanted that philosophy should be made as a rigorous science. Of course, it should not be same as the natural sciences, physics, chemistry, bio, or other, but it should be, basically method should be scientific. And therefore, he believed that both philosophers and scientists should begin with hidden assumptions. So natural science assumes that world exists as a physical reality and proceed to study through experiments. However, science rarely questions how the world is experienced by consciousness. So what Husserl said, he said that before studying the world scientifically, we must first understand how the world appears in the consciousness. So this should be our first step, basically. So therefore, his suggestion was that phenomenology is prior to science, actually. It's a foundational discipline of all the sciences. So first we should understand how the words appears in the consciousness, and then we should go with the question that how basically word exists as a physical reality and proceed to study through experiments. The nature of the word. So before studying the nature of word or reality, we should first study how the words appear in the consciousness, and that is what phenomenology is supposed to do. So this becomes a foundation of all other sciences subsequent studies. So therefore, Husserl's philosophy is presuppositionless philosophy. This is also called presuppositionless theory or philosophy. And he wrote himself, philosophy begins in absolute poverty. What does it mean? This means that philosophy should start without any prior assumption. So there are no assumptions, so therefore it's total poverty. Because assumptions, he meant, assumptionless, he meant that it's poverty is there. So that's what presuppositionless or assumptionless, and it should not make any assumptions. That's what his method was. Now, it also, phenomenology also avoids naturalism and psycholism. Now, what are these two? Because we should first try to understand this, and then we should try to understand how this is avoided, or these are avoided by phenomenology. Now, Husserl, basically, he said that these two concepts or methods are basically wrong, or errors, or distorted philosophy. So, his phenomenology basically attempts to overcome both naturalism or errors in the naturalism and psycholism. That's what his contention was. How? Let us see. He criticized naturalism. Now, what is naturalism? Naturalism assumes that world is a given natural fact, and everything must be explained in terms of natural sciences. This is the concept of naturalism. So according to naturalism, the world exists independently. Human beings are part of nature. Consciousness is simply a natural phenomena. Now, this is basically what actually is studied in modern science and normal everyday thinking. So, this is the concept of naturalism. But he criticized this. What he said, that this approach of naturalism, ignores a fundamental question: how does word appear in our consciousness? So before we talk about the reality or before we talk about the existence of the word, we must first understand how the word is experienced in our consciousness. And since it is not done, therefore there is an error in this. Therefore, consciousness cannot simply be reduced to nature. Phenomenology studies the relation between consciousness and the word. And as we have seen in previous paragraphs, it's basically foundation of the natural sciences. That's what he meant. Now, what is psychologism and what is its critique? Now, psychologism is a theory that the foundations of logic and mathematics lie in psychological processes. Now, this view of psychological processes was supported by thinkers like Mill. Now, according to psychologism, logical laws are valid because how the human mind operates. For example, if we see law of non-contradiction is considered true because human mind cannot think contradictory propositions. But Husserl strongly rejected this view. And what he said in Logical Investigation, in his book, Logical Investigation, as we have seen, it was the first book and basic book which advanced the concept of phenomenology. He argued that logical and mathematical truths are objective and universal. For example, mathematical truths, as we know, 2 plus 2 is 4. Now, this remains true even if human minds thinks about that, whatever they may think. But psychology studies mental processes, and logic studies validity of reasoning. So, psychologism would make logic relative to human psychology, which would lead to skepticism. So, therefore, there is a problem in this theory also. And then Husserl insisted that logic deals with ideal objects that are independent of psychological processes. Now, after criticizing both naturalism and psychologism, he came up with phenomenology and phenomenological method. Now, what is phenomenological method? Now, let us try to understand this. Now, a number of questions have been asked earlier on this also. So, we will try to in detail study what is the phenomenological method. Now, as we have read, his objective was to achieve presuppositionless philosophy. There should not be any assumptionless philosophy, we can say. So for this, he developed phenomenological method. Now, what is the aim of this method? To reach pure phenomena as they appear in consciousness. Because his theory was that first we should study the nature of consciousness itself. And this study or this method, phenomenological method, involves two procedures. First is epoche or bracketing, and second is reduction. Now we'll try to study these two terms because these two terms sometimes in short notes also it has come, and in longer questions also it may come. What is epoche or bracketing and what is reduction? Because these are the components of the phenomenological method. Now first let us see epoche. Now this term comes from Greek philosophy. And what does it mean? Suspension of the judgment. So in phenomenological method, basically, it means putting our beliefs about the word into brackets. Suspend that. So we suspend judgments about existence of the word, scientific theories, religious beliefs, social prejudices, etc. And philosophical doctrines also. So therefore, what does it mean? First, you suspend your judgment regarding any beliefs regarding this word or any reality which we are having. But this does not mean that we are denying the reality. No. It only means that we temporarily ignore these assumptions so that we can study experience itself. So this basically what Husserl calls phenomenological attitude, which is detached and reflective way of examining the experience. So basically, epoche or bracketing leads to phenomenological attitude, which is a very, very neutral way of reflecting the experience or consciousness itself. Now, what is reduction? Because as we know, there are two methods for phenomenological methods, two terms we have. Reduction even after bracketing, because bracketing means suspending the judgment. So even after bracketing external assumptions, consciousness may still be influenced by internal psychological factors. So therefore, what Husserl says, he comes up with the term reduction, which purifies the consciousness further. Because with epoche, we have reduced or removed the external factors or external, you can say, assumptions. Now with reduction, now we will be removing internal psychological factors. So this, I mean, he comes up, he further little more description of reduction. He comes up with three types of reduction, which actually purifies the consciousness further and basically removes the internal psychological factors. What are those three types of reductions? See, first is phenomenological or psychological reduction itself. Now, this step basically removes what it does, it removes emotions, moods, biases, personal attitudes, etc. Because according to him, these factors distort the perception or experience. So by eliminating them, we can reach to a more purer experience as it appears in the consciousness. Now, what is the second type of reduction? This is transcendental reduction. Now, what does it mean? Here, Husserl brackets the empirical ego itself. Now, what is empirical ego? Is the individual self with personal characteristics. That is called empirical ego. So, after removing it, we arrived at transcendental consciousness. So, this is pure field of awareness according to him, in which all experiences appear. So it is not the consciousness of a particular individual, but a universal structure of experience. That's what we arrive at. Now, what is third reduction, type of reduction? This is eidetic reduction. This is final steps to discover the essence or eidos of phenomena. So how we may encounter many particular trees, but through reflection, we grasp the essential structure of treenessness. So this essence is discovered through eidetic intuition or eidetic reduction. So eidetic intuition is a direct intellectual insight into the essential structure of the object. It may be any object. It may be any object of the world, table, tree, book, or anything for that matter. So then he comes with theory of essences. Because now here essences we have reached to essences after the epoche and reduction. Now then he comes up with theory of essences. So for him, ultimate goal of phenomenology is to discover the essences of each experience. Now, essence refers to essential meaning or universal structure of the phenomena, which is not dependent on any personal or any individual. So these essences resemble the idea of Plato, because if you studied Plato, he has given the idea of forms. So this in a way resembles that, but then it's a different also. How? Plato believed that ideas exist independently in a separate realm. Plato's ideas are totally independent. But Husserl argues that essence exists in relation to consciousness. So here, basically, he arrives at the essence after analyzing the experience or consciousness in detail. So they are neither purely mental nor independent realities. Instead, they are correlates of consciousness. So essences are grasped through eidetic intuition, which allows us to understand the essential meaning of the objects. So this is basically, in a way, if you can see, phenomenology. Now, we will also, another concept of Husserl, we will try to study intentionality of consciousness. Now, this is one of the very fundamental ideas of, because sometimes questions have been asked on this also, one of the most fundamental ideas. Now, this concept was originally developed by French Brentano. And intentionality means that consciousness is always directed towards something. There is an intention of the consciousness, basically. It's always directed towards some or the other thing. For example, let us see one example. Thinking is thinking about something. Thinking cannot be in vacuum. Remembering is remembering something. Desiring is desiring something. So any activity is about something. So thus consciousness has always an object. So there is no such thing, I mean, as per Husserl, that anything is objectless consciousness is not possible. So therefore, object of consciousness does not necessarily have to exist. But he said, I mean, even though there cannot be objectless consciousness, but then object of consciousness does not necessarily have to exist. It may be even non-existent also. For example, we can think of Golden Mountain, even though it does not exist. So therefore, intentionality shows how consciousness relates to the world. Now we'll go to another two concepts which are related to intentionality of consciousness, noesis and noema. Now, Husserl explains intentionality through two components, noesis and noma. What is noesis? Noesis is act of consciousness. For example, perceiving, imagining, thinking, remembering, all these are noesis or act of consciousness. What is noma? Noma is object or meaning intended by consciousness. So, for example, when a person imagines a mountain, so here imagining is noesis and imagine mountain is noema. So, thus consciousness always involves correlation between noesis and noema, that is act and object. Now, phenomenologically reduced pure phenomena. Let us try to understand this concept also. So, after applying epoche and reduction, we reach pure consciousness. Now, what appears in this purified consciousness is pure phenomena. So, these pure phenomena are the foundation of knowledge. So, this is the important conclusion from phenomenology. Now, this pure phenomena or foundation of knowledge, they are immanent, that is present in consciousness, and transcendent also, not created by consciousness. So it's not that they are created by consciousness. So on the basis of these pure phenomena, we can reconstruct the knowledge of the world. So this is what he says as far as phenomenology is concerned. Now, after understanding in brief and very simple terms what is phenomenology, let us try to understand what are the criticism directed against Husserl. Because it has been criticized by a number of philosophers, a number of schools. So we'll try to briefly understand what is the criticism, because in exam also critical evaluation or balanced criticism is very, very important and it needs to be done. So first we will take up existential phenomenologist. I mean, a branch of phenomenology that is called existential, where existence philosophers also believed in part of phenomenology. Thinkers like Martin Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre, they also criticized actually Husserl's philosophy. And they said that complete bracketing of the word is impossible. Now, bracketing, if you understand what is bracketing, epoche and bracketing is suspension of the decision making or suspension of the basically any conclusion. You are suspending that. Why? Because you just want to purify the whole experience or reach to the essence of the experience. So that's what is, they said that complete bracketing of the word is impossible. Human beings always exist in the word, so the word cannot be suspended. Then there are analytic philosophers like Ayer and Ryle. What they said, they criticized, argued that presuppositionless philosophy is impossible because experience always involves concept and the language. So this is what analytical philosophers said. Then another school of philosophy, linguistic philosophy. For example, Wittgenstein. He came up with the idea or rejected the idea of essences. and proposed the concept of family resemblances. If you study Wittgenstein's philosophy, you will understand that he advocated instead the concept of family resemblances. Now, but what is the importance? I mean, despite the various schools have criticized, this phenomenology is, having a lot of importance in the modern philosophy, particularly. So, because it has influenced many modern thinkers, modern philosophers, it has led to several philosophical traditions such as existentialist phenomenology, then hermeneutics, then existentialism. It also has influenced thinkers like Martin Heidegger, Sartre, then Merleau-Ponty. So, phenomenology, therefore, represents one of the most significant philosophical movements of the 20th century, because it basically uh, objective is to purify our experience itself, the process of study, and also it not only, the basis or foundation of science also, it wanted to purify and make it more effective. So with this, because this in brief, I wanted to tell about phenomenology. In next class, what I would like to do is, I would like to take up a few uh, subtopics from the PYQs, basically on phenomenology, and we'll go in little more detail, because briefly we have now understood, but then a few questions have been continuously been repeated. So those questions we would like to take up, or those topics we would like to take up, because and little will go a little more deeper basically. So we'll meet in next class. Thanks for participating in the class today. Thank you.